Hello and welcome to this Paper 2 exam warm-up for AQA GCSE Business. In this session we're going to do some exam practice questions and look at some of the key elements of the Paper 2 exam. Let's start with some true or false questions. Retained profit and hire purchase are both examples of internal sources of finance. Retained profit and hire purchase are both examples of internal sources of finance. Is that statement true or is it false? Is it true or false? Make a decision, decide whether you think it's true or false. And of course, you can pause the recording at any point if you need more time. So retained profit, hire purchase, are they both examples of internal sources of finance? The correct answer here is false. They are not both internal sources of finance. Whilst retained profit is indeed an internal source, hire purchase is an external source of finance. So the answer is false. Well done if you got that right. Second of our true or false questions. Flexible working hours is an example of a common characteristic of an entrepreneur. Flexible working hours, is it an example of a common characteristic of an entrepreneur? Once again, decide whether you think the statement is true or if it's false. Is it true or is it false? Let's reveal the answer. This is also false. Remember, the characteristic of an entrepreneur was examined in paper 1, but objectives of an entrepreneur was not. It's an area that's easily muddled. Objectives of an entrepreneur and characteristics of entrepreneurs. It's easily muddled up. Other objectives of an entrepreneur might be things like being your own boss, pursuing an interest, dissatisfaction with their current job, and so on. Flexible working hours is an objective of an entrepreneur rather than a characteristic, and that is why this statement is false. One more true or false. This time, a change in legislation is an example of an external factor that can affect business decision-making. A change in legislation is an example of an external factor that can affect business decision-making. Is that true or false? Make your decision. Pause the video if you need more time. Change in legislation, is it an external factor that can affect business decision-making? The answer here, of course, is true. It's true. Legislation, laws are an external factor. And in the specification, other external changes listed include changes in technology, the economy, and environmental expectations. So change in technology, economy, and environmental expectations are other external changes listed in the spec. Here's an overview of Paper 2. Paper 2, of course, looks at influences of marketing and finance on business activity. It's assessed with a 1 hour 45-minute exam, same with Paper 1, and it's 90 marks in total and equates to 50% of the GCSE. So Paper 2, exactly the same in that respect as Paper 1. The assessment overview, there's 3 sections. Section A, Section B, Section C. In Section A, 20 marks available. There is no case study, no context in Section A. Section B, there is business context, and there's usually approximately 35 marks. Section C also has context, and there are about 35 marks here as well, which includes a 12-mark synoptic question. So businesses in the real world, influences on business, marketing and finance are the Paper 2 topics to focus on. Those are the topics that can be examined. Business in the real world, influences on business, marketing and finance. And as with Paper 1, case studies will be based on businesses operating in local, national and global contexts. That's the overview of Paper 2. And the content in Paper 2, we've got 3.1, Business in the Real World, 3.2, Influences on Business, and then the standalone topics for Paper 2, 3.5, Marketing, 3.6 finance. So those are the 4 units that paper 2 is based on. And if we look at the structure of paper 2, section A, section B, section C, as we said before, just to confirm, section A's got no context. There are 6 multiple choice questions and 6 short answer questions in section A, and you may be asked to calculate. Calculations can come up in any of those 3 sections. So you may be asked to calculate in section A. The section A always ends with a 4-mark question. And the types of questions you usually get in section A, you get the multiple choice questions, you get identify, state, calculate, and or explain questions. That's section A. Section B, more marks available, usually about 35. Item A and B, it's split into 2 sections. So the context is split into 2 sections. There are 3 or 4 questions after each of those. So 3 or 4 after item A, 3 or 4 after item B. You may be asked to calculate. I said the calculations could come up in any of the sections. There are short answer questions that some of which may require no context, some of which will require context, and we'll look at that in a moment. You get an analyse question worth 6 marks, and advise, recommend questions worth 9 marks. So a range of questions, command words here: identify, state, give, define, explain, calculate, analyse, recommend, and or advise are the question types or the command words that can come up. That's section B. Finally, section C. Item C, item D, and possibly E. So it's split into 2 or 3 sections. In section C in this year's paper, in paper 1, paper 1 was split into 3 sections. Section C was split into 3 sections. So a lot of reading. Case studies are quite long. You need to factor in reading time and manage your time accordingly to ensure that you finish. Now, if you ran out of time in paper 1, you need to think about how you're going to address that in paper 2. Manage the time. Okay, section A, if section A is completed in 15 minutes, it's going to leave an even split between sections B and C if you apply a mark a minute. So use the extra 15 minutes then to read case studies and ensure you're meeting the demands of each question. Time management, really important. Section C in paper 1, split into 3 sections. Same here, paper 2, it could be split into 3 sections, and the structure of the questions depends on how many sections it's split into. Remember, you can be asked to calculate here. You can get the short answer questions that require context or some that require no context. There are analyse questions and evaluate questions and a range of different command words, as you can see on the screen. Section C could take 2 or 3 sections. Time management is crucial either way. This activity is called red herring. We've got 4 fish on the screen. 3 of the fish will have something in common, 1 doesn't, and that will be our red herring. So you need to identify which is the red herring by identifying the link between the other 3. We're going to look at 2 questions based on market research because market research is such a commonly assessed topic. Remember, you must show distinct understanding of the topic area in the question. Vague responses that could link to a number of research methods or a different area of the spec may not be awarded. So avoid the vague responses, be precise, and try to show distinct understanding. So here are our 4 fish. We've got focus group, we've got questionnaire, internet, and interview. Focus group, questionnaire, internet, and interview. Remember, these are all about market research. What's the link between 3 of the fish, and therefore, what is the odd one out or the red herring? Because you're watching a recording here, of course, you can pause and give yourself a bit more time. We'll reveal the answer. The answer here, the red herring, is C, and the reason that C, internet, is the odd one out is because the other three are all linked together as primary market research methods. Focus groups, questionnaires and interviews are all types of market research, primary market research methods. Internet, of course, would be secondary. And here's another red herring question. We've got A, printed press. We've got B, customer feedback survey. C, competitor websites. And D, census. Printed press, customer feedback survey, competitor websites and census. Which is the red herring? Which is the odd one out? What links the other three fish together? Let's look at the answer. And this time the red herring is B. Customer feedback survey is the odd one out because a customer feedback survey is primary market research method, and printed press, competitor websites and census are all secondary market research methods. Very well done if you got that right. Multiple choice questions, let's recap those because paper 2 is going to start with 6 of them. 6 multiple choice questions to start. Paper 1 included 3 multiple choice questions that linked to which of the following is true or which of the following is most likely to be correct. So 3 of the 6 questions on paper 1 had that in the question itself. So it's likely that one of the multiple choice questions will be a formula question and or ask which of the following is an example of. It's likely that one of the MCQs will be a formula question and or start with which of the following is an example of. Best way to prepare for multiple choice questions is simply to revise all the content using the specification and learn all the relevant formulae. So use the specification, learn the formulae, revise all the content. Just remember, multiple choice questions are computer marked. Please follow the instructions carefully on how to select an answer and also what to do if you change your mind. If they're computer marked, if the computer can't tell which answer you've gone for, it's likely you're going to get it wrong. So please follow the instructions carefully and always, always guess. If you're unsure, get to a point where you can guess. Never, ever leave them blank. Multiple choice questions, always guess if you're unsure. Let's look at some 2-statement multiple choice questions now. Here's the first of our 2-statement MCQs. First of all, statement 1, cash cows are products with high market shares in high growth markets. Statement number 2, question marks are products that have low market shares in low growth markets. If you think that both statements are true, go for A. If you think the first one's true but the second one isn't, go for B. If you think that the first statement is false and the second statement is true, go for C. And if you think neither of them are true, both are false, go for D. So cash cows, they have high market share in high growth markets, and are question marks products with low market shares in low growth markets. Well, the correct answer here is D, because neither statement is true. Cash cows have high market shares, but in low growth markets. Question marks may have low market shares, but they're in high growth markets. So neither statement is true, and therefore D is the correct answer. Here's another 2-statement MCQ. Current asset is something of value that a business holds for more than a year. And statement 2, an overdraft is an example of a current liability. Do we think those statements are true or false? As before, if we think they're both true, choose option A. If you think that statement 1 is true but statement 2 isn't, go for B. Alternatively, if you think that statement 1 is false but statement 2 is true, go for C. And lastly, both false, it's option D. What do you think is the correct answer? Let's reveal And C is the correct answer. C is the correct response. Statement 1's false. Current asset is something of value that a business holds, but it holds it for less than a year. So current assets, the business holds for less than a year. So statement 1 is false. Statement 2, an overdraft is an example of a current liability, something that the business needs to pay in less than a year, in less than 12 months. So C was the correct option here. Here's our third two-statement MCQ. First of all, a statement of financial position. The values for total equity and net assets will always be the same. That's statement 1. Statement 2, price skimming involves setting a high price when a product first enters a market. As before, if you think they're both true, it's option A. If you think statement 1's true but statement 2 isn't, go for B. If you think that statement 1 is false but statement 2 is true, go for C. And statement 1 and 2 both being false would be option D. Statement of financial position and price skimming. Do we think those statements are true or false? Let's look at the answer. And the correct answer here for two-statement MCQ number 3 is A. And it's A because they're both true. In a statement of financial position or a balance sheet, the values for total equity and net assets will always be the same. They will always balance. And price skimming does indeed involve setting a high price when a product first enters a market. Both of them are true, so it's answer A. Very well done if you got that right. Let's look at those identify and state questions. Assessment objective 1 here. This type of question usually follows the 6 MCQs that you get in section A, but it may also appear in sections B and C. If the question itself does not make reference to the context, if it doesn't mention the business or the context, you don't need to link your answer to the case. So if it doesn't mention the context in the question, you don't need to link your answer to the case. This is obviously sections B and C. Section A, there is no context anyway. But remember, wherever the identify or state questions come up, there's no need to write in full sentences. So you can use these types of questions to speed up and gain time in the paper. If the question asks for 2 points, just make sure that your answers, your 2 points, are distinct from each other. Make sure they're distinct. We'll do some practice on 2 points in a moment. Make sure you show your understanding of the topic area in the question. As we said before, avoid vagueness. Be precise. So here's an exercise. Give me 2. In this case, give me 2 investment projects that a business may undertake. So we'll run the timer. Think about 2 investment projects a business may undertake. So 2 investment projects a business may undertake. Let's look at a couple of suggestions. Well, buildings could be an investment project, and so could vehicles. Maybe you've got machinery or capital equipment as well. Buildings and vehicles, 2 examples of projects, investment projects a business may undertake. And here's another give me 2 exercise. This time, give me 2 ways a business can measure success. Give me 2 ways a business can measure success. Here's the timer. So 2 ways a business can measure success. Suggestions might be by measuring market share. If market share is increasing, the business may consider that one type of success or one way of measuring success. Secondly, if the number of positive customer reviews is rising. You might have also gone for sales or profit as your options. So 2 ways in which a business can measure success. Let's just think about those no context explain questions, because they're usually worth 2 marks and are mostly found in section A. So these are the no context explain questions. The key to success here is to state a point and develop that point using what we call a connective. An example of a connective could be something like this means that, or this is because. So make a point and develop that point using a connective. Remember, we said the final question in section A is always worth 4 marks. You'll need to apply the same principles, those principles from a 2-mark non-context question, twice, ensuring that each point is distinct. So you're going to make 2 points, and each point is going to be developed using a connective. There are 2-mark no context explain questions. So there are explain questions worth 2 marks that don't require context in sections B and C. And the way to identify them is if the question doesn't make reference to the context, you don't need to apply your answer to the case. So the 2-mark no context explain questions can appear in sections B and C. The business name or the context won't be mentioned in the question. So you don't need to link your answer to the case. I hope that is clear. So here's a little stepping stone exercise just to try and illustrate the use of connectives. Explain 2 factors affecting the location decision of a business. So 2 factors affecting the location decision of a business. There's no mention of a specific context, so no context required. Explain 2 factors though. 1 factor could be transport links, so that would get a mark. But remember here, we would have to develop this point. So transport links is our point worth a mark. The development of that is to ensure that the business is easily able to distribute its products to its customers by an agreed date. Transport links to ensure that the business is easily able to distribute its products to its customers by an agreed date. That would get a 2nd mark. So transport links and then the development, that's 2 marks. Then we would give a 2nd factor and develop that as well. So other factors that we might list could include things like cost, availability of skilled labour, availability of raw materials, and or proximity to competition. Of course, the 2nd factor would get us a 3rd mark. The explanation, the development, would get the 4th mark. So you must explain that 2nd point in order to get full marks. And a quick recap on calculation questions as well, because they can appear in any section of the paper and they can range from 2 to 5 marks in value. The question appeared in paper 1 was quite challenging, and it's really important you always attempt a calculation question. Always attempt it, but make sure you spend a proportionate amount of time attempting it. So if it's a 2-marker, a 3-marker, a 4-marker, or a 5-mark calculation question, spend an appropriate amount of time on it. Don't spend too long on it, in other words. So there are always marks available for workings. Even if you can't complete the whole calculation, show your process. Show what you do know. So you can hopefully earn some marks and get some credit, even if you don't get the final answer correct. Make sure you check the values of column headings. Make sure you write your answer to 2 decimal places when appropriate, in other words, when it's asked for. And make sure that your final answer is clear. If you can do that, then you should perform much better on those calculation questions. Here's some context then. We're going to look at Lush. Lush Cosmetics is a business that specialises in making and selling products for the skin, face, hair and body. Acting ethically is very important to Lush, as it prides itself on providing customers with beauty products that respect the environment, do not harm animals and contain natural ingredients. A growing number of its products are vegan, however all are vegetarian and are made fresh by hand. Despite operating in a highly competitive market, Lush is able to charge high prices for its products. The business is currently experiencing increasing sales. There's some context. Think about sections B and C of the exam, where you're going to be given context and then questions that follow may require you to use that. And this activity is called Chains of Analysis. So the question here is to analyse one benefit to Lush of acting ethically. And then we'll look at some sentences to answer this question, but the sentences are in the wrong order. Here are the sentences. So first of all, one benefit is that customers will be prepared to pay a higher selling price for its cosmetic products, and as a result will value Lush's ethical decisions, such as respecting the environment when selling and making goods, which will lead to Lush continuing to experience an increase in sales. This is because a growing number of consumers are interested in buying products from businesses that have high moral standards. This will mean that Lush will generate more revenue from each body, face and hair product sold. Now we've got 5 sentences there, all related to this question, analyse one benefit to Lush of acting ethically. However, they're in the wrong order. So just give some thought. How would we arrange those and get them into the correct order? They're not in the right order at the moment. How do we get them into the correct order? If you need more time, just pause here. And we'll look now at what the correct order would be. Hopefully it is similar or the same as what you've got. There we are. So the correct order is in fact 1, 4, 2, 5, 3. Let's read through that just to make sure and to see why that makes sense. We've got connectives here in red. So the use of connectives is helping build and demonstrate analysis. But of course, we're talking about Lush, and the question specifically mentions the context. One benefit to Lush, and therefore the answer requires application. So in green here, we've got the application, the reference to the case and to the context. Here we are then. One benefit is that customers will be prepared to pay a higher selling price for its cosmetic products. This is because, good connective, this is because a growing number of consumers are interested in buying products from businesses that have high moral standards, and as a result will value Lush's ethical decisions, such as respecting the environment, application, when selling and making goods. This will mean that Lush will generate more revenue from each body, face and hair product sold, which will lead to Lush continuing to experience an increase in sales. Combination there of application in green and analysis using connectives. Six-mark analyse questions. You're going to need one relevant point. Okay, one relevant point, and please try and avoid listed points. So one relevant point, and you're going to fully analyse that. Fully analyse it using connectives. One relevant point, and fully analyse it using connectives, and make sure that you blend good quality context throughout your answer. And if you look back at that previous exercise, you can see it's been fully analysed. We've used lots of connectives, 4 in total, I think, and there's context blended throughout the paragraph. 3 or 4 different mentions of Lush and their context. That's the structure for 6-mark analyse questions. At the 9-mark questions, and 9-mark questions here are going to need some balance. So 9-mark questions, advise or recommend, and here's the structure of the analytical paragraphs. We've got a positive point, analysed in context, and we can use figures, we can use data here to support if it's relevant. So we've got our advantage, one positive point, that's analysed and it's in context. And then the balance comes from the negative point, which is also analysed in context, and we can also make use of figures and data here if it's relevant. So our analytical paragraphs, positive and negative. Then the 12-mark question, analyse and evaluate, and the structure of our analytical paragraphs here. We've got bullet point 1. So we're looking at bullet point 1 from the question. One positive point, analysed in context, showing the integrated nature of business. So we'll take bullet point 1, and we're going to have a positive point analysed in context, showing the integrated nature of business. Then the second analytical paragraph is bullet point 2. And again, it's a positive of bullet point 2, with the analysis in context, showing the integrated nature of business, because the 12-mark question now is synoptic. It's drawing on everything. So just note here, the balance of the 12-marker, we've got bullet point 1 positive and bullet point 2 positive. So it's an advantage of each. So 9 and 12-mark questions both require a 3-paragraph approach. We've got the 2 analytical paragraphs that we looked at in the previous slides. 2 analytical paragraphs with detailed chains of argument embedded in the context. So focused on the question, embedded in the context, applied to that context with detailed chains of argument. We've got balance in the analytical paragraphs. In the 9-mark question, that means advantage and disadvantage. In the 12-mark question, the balance means looking at the positives of bullet point 1 and the positive of bullet point 2. In both 9 and 12-mark questions, that third paragraph is a detailed, chunky conclusion that answers the question set, and it includes new evidence. So you're going to bring in something else to support your decision, and it includes a depends on factor. For the 12-mark question, make sure you refer to both options in the conclusion by weighing up one option against the other. You need to mention both options. Ensure you make a clear choice as to which one out of the 2 options is the best, and clearly justify why it is that you've come to that decision. Both questions, 9 and 12, require good quality context blended throughout. Not isolated elements, but blended throughout. Those are the key points for the 9 and 12-mark questions. And let's finish with some exam gold. Please watch the time. And that's particularly the case if you run out of time in paper 1. It's about a mark a minute, or a minute a mark. So please keep an eye on the time, manage your time effectively. Read the case studies carefully and try and annotate. Try and pick out key elements. Write notes to yourself as you read. Make sure you stay tightly focused on the question. Don't over-answer the shorter questions. So stay focused on the question and use a mixture of good quality context in your responses where it's relevant. And where it's going to be relevant is where it's going to mention the context in the question. 6, 9 and 12-mark questions, what you're looking for is full analysis. There isn't a set number of points, but it's full analysis. In the 9 and 12-mark questions, you need to show balance in your analytical paragraphs and, really important, include a well-justified conclusion. Remember that your conclusion is going to include new evidence as well as a depends on factor. And it's crucial that you answer the question set. And it might be that before you write that conclusion, you just look back at the question, remind yourself what the question is, so that that third paragraph, that chunky conclusion, is really focused on the question. That brings us to the end of this exam warm-up for paper 2. Only thing left for me to say is good luck for the examination. Thanks for watching.